They said humans had soft hearts, that they were gentle, peaceful creatures, incapable of the savage brutality that defined so many other species. I was told this countless times growing up, as we watched from the safety of our ships, seeing humans from afar. To us, they seemed like fragile beings. But everything changed the day I witnessed one of them cut down an entire army, without hesitation. It was the first time I met Dembe. At first, I couldn't understand why the humans were so drawn to him, or why the elders in our tribe spoke of him with reverence. After all, he was just another human, wasn't he? But then came the day that shattered everything I thought I knew about the fragile species. We had been allies for years. After all, we shared meals, stories, and even traditions. But all of that was put to the test when we found ourselves face to face with an enemy force, one far stronger than we were. I watched as Dembe stepped forward, unarmed and determined. And what happened next, I can't forget. It all started years earlier, back when we first met. The war between our people and the humans had been fierce, with no end in sight. I can still remember the first time I saw Dembe. His eyes, filled with curiosity, met mine across the battlefield. There were no words, no battle cries, just the tense stillness of two beings, realizing that they were not as different as they once believed. What followed was a friendship that defied every expectation. I never thought it possible that one day I would be standing beside him, watching him wield something far more powerful than a weapon. In the beginning, it was all about the little things, games we played, the innocent joy of discovering how much we had in common. I was fascinated by how different Dembe was from me, yet how we still found ways to laugh, to share, to connect. While I was faster, Dembe had an endurance that made me feel like I was sprinting on empty. We spent hours running, hiding, searching, discovering not just each other's weaknesses, but our strengths as well. But none of those games would prepare me for what was to come when we faced real danger. Our peaceful coexistence was shattered when the enemy arrived, a brutal, merciless force that came to wipe us out. No one had ever seen such ferocity, not even from our people. We were overwhelmed, outmatched, and facing the kind of terror that could break the strongest of wills. It was in the midst of this chaos that Dembe revealed his true power, not in the way you might expect, with weapons or strength, but with something far more terrifying. He didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. He fought in a way that I never thought possible. The battlefield became a stage, and he, the star performer. The sounds of gunfire and cries of the wounded were drowned out by the sound of his voice, commanding, soothing, and terrifying all at once. And then the moment came, the moment that would change everything. The enemy had surrounded us, and we were backed into a corner with nowhere to run. But Dembe stood in front of me, calm and resolute, as if he had seen this kind of thing before. He reached for a weapon, but it wasn't like anything I had ever seen. It wasn't a sword, or a gun, or anything that made sense. It was something different. With it, he turned the tide of battle, cutting down the enemy one by one, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't believe my eyes. The humans I had been taught to think of as soft-hearted, weak. They weren't weak at all. Dembe had shown me the true strength of his kind, not through brute force, but through something far more profound. His resolve, his courage, his ability to turn a hopeless situation into a victory. But it didn't end there. What happened next would haunt me forever. Just as we thought the worst was over, the enemy revealed a hidden weapon, a force unlike anything we had ever seen. And for the first time, I saw a glimpse of doubt in Dembe's eyes. The weight of what we had just accomplished seemed to crash down on him. But before I could ask, he did something that left me speechless. He turned to me, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding us, and said, "We're not done yet." The army that surrounded us was no longer our only threat. There was something bigger, something darker on the horizon, and Dembe knew that the fight wasn't over. The real challenge had only just begun. What happened next? How did a single human manage to defy the impossible? And how did our once innocent perceptions of them change forever? How could someone who had once been so carefree and joyful, so full of life, suddenly be the beacon of strength and courage we needed? I can't tell you everything just yet, but I can tell you this: they were our friends, and they were more than capable of anything they set their hearts to, even if the universe had never seen anything like it before. And yet, Dembe's resolve never wavered. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. And then, in the middle of the chaos, we heard it, a voice, not from our side, but from the enemy's. It was a voice I recognized. It was one of their commanders, someone I had faced before in battle, and his words sent a chill through my spine. The end is near. There's no escape. Surrender and your world will be spared. I could see the way Dembe tensed beside me. He wasn't going to surrender. He never would. But I also knew that if we didn't find a way to stop this now, we would lose everything. The tension in the air was suffocating. Every moment felt like it could be our last. The enemy's forces were closing in, their weapons poised to finish what they had started. And there, standing at the edge of this unimaginable crisis, we were left with one question. Could we, mere mortals, possibly stand against the forces that had now arrayed themselves before us? Or would Dembe's quiet strength and determination be enough to lead us through the darkness, into the light of victory? The answer, I feared, would not come easily, but it was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. As the enemy's forces closed in, the weight of everything we had fought for seemed to press down on us. The sky above us had turned dark with the shadow of their massive ship, and the ground shook with the rumble of their weapons. It felt like time was running out, like we were standing on the edge of a cliff, with nowhere left to go. I could see it in Dembe's eyes. He wasn't afraid, but he knew the odds were stacked against us. The whole world seemed to be watching, waiting for something to happen. Then, in a sudden, almost impossible turn of events, the voice from the enemy commander crackled across the comms again. "You think you've won?" The voice sneered. "This is just the beginning. There's nothing left for you now. Surrender and we'll spare your people." It should have been a blow. It should have broken us. But instead, it only hardened Dembe's resolve. I could see the anger and the fire building in him. The same fire I had seen when we were kids. The same determination that had gotten us through every battle before. He wasn't just going to surrender. Not now, not ever. "I've seen enough," Dembe said, his voice low but fierce. "We're not giving up. Not today." I could feel the tension in the air as Dembe stepped forward. His gaze locked on the enemy forces. His fists clenched. I didn't know what he was planning, but I knew one thing for sure. This was the moment where everything changed. The battlefield had gone quiet, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, Dembe did something that stunned me. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't charge into battle like I thought he would. Instead, he lifted his hand, and there, at the tip of his fingers, a faint light began to glow. I had seen this before, in our training. His ability to connect with something beyond the physical world. It was a rare talent among humans, one few could harness. He was tapping into something ancient, something we had long forgotten. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a battle of wills. Dembe's hand stretched out, and the light grew brighter. The very air around us seemed to ripple with energy, and the ground beneath us trembled. Again! But this time, it wasn't from the enemy's weapons. It was from the power Dembe had unlocked. An energy unlike anything we had seen before. The enemy forces hesitated, their movements faltering for the first time since they had arrived. I saw them pause, looking at one another in confusion, uncertainty, creeping into their ranks. Then, Dembe's voice rang out, clear and commanding, "We're not the ones who will fall today." With those words, the ground cracked open, and the energy he had summoned surged forward. It was like nothing I could have ever imagined. An explosion of light and force that sent the enemy's forces stumbling backward, their weapons dropping to the ground, their soldiers disoriented. The very air seemed to pulse with power, as though the universe itself had turned against them. I couldn't believe my eyes. The enemy's mighty ship, which had once seemed so invincible, now quivered in the face of Dembe's power. It wasn't just the physical force they had to contend with. It was something deeper, something primal. Dembe had tapped into the essence of the planet itself, and now he was using that power to fight back. It was over before it even truly began. The enemy commander, who had been so certain of their victory, now stumbled backward, his own people abandoning their positions in confusion. They had underestimated Dembe, and in doing so, they had sealed their own fate. The power Dembe had unlocked was too much for them to handle, and they retreated into the shadows, their ship lifting off the ground and disappearing into the sky. It was over. The battle had been won, but not through brute force or violence. It had been won through understanding, through the strength of will, and through the power of friendship. As the dust settled and the battlefield fell silent, I turned to Dembe, who was standing there, panting but triumphant. His eyes met mine, and for a moment there was nothing but the bond between us, the shared history, and the knowledge that we had saved our world. We had done the impossible, and we had done it together. I realized then that the story of humanity wasn't just one of strength or weakness. It was one of resilience, of finding hope even in the darkest of times. The human heart, I had learned, wasn't soft or weak. It was capable of immense power, of unimaginable courage. Dembe had shown me that, and in doing so, he had shown me the true strength of his people. As we stood there, the sun breaking through the clouds, I couldn't help but think about how far we had come, from the first time we met, to the battle that had nearly destroyed us. To this moment of victory, we had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always hope. Dembe had taught me that the heart of a human was not something to be underestimated. It was something to be revered. The war was over. Our world was safe. And though the scars of battle would remain, there was a quiet peace that settled over us. We had done what no one thought possible. We had survived. And as we looked out at the horizon, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. And so, the story of our friendship came full circle. It was a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected alliances could change the course of history. The humans, with their soft hearts, had shown us what it truly meant to fight for what you believe in. And in doing so, they had changed everything. As I stood beside Dembe, I couldn't help but smile. They said humans had soft hearts. But now I knew better, and so did everyone else.